Hi, welcome to Discussing Fitchburg Now. I'm your host, Sam Squalia. We are coming from you from the Workers Credit Union virtual studios on FATV. And this week we have a special video for you. We are airing Fitchburg's first virtual Juneteenth event in a part 1 and a part 2 series. Let me give you a little background on what Juneteenth is. Juneteenth is the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States. Dating back to 1865, it was on June 19th that Union soldiers led by Major General Gordon Granger landed at Galveston, Texas, with news that the war had ended and that the enslaved were now free. Note that this was 2.5 years after President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, which had become official January 1st, 1863. This is why Juneteenth is now celebrated worldwide. Fitchburg's first Juneteenth virtual event, held due to the COVID-19 pandemic, was a full-day virtual event held on Juneteenth and has been edited here for you, our DFN on FATV audience, for a 2-part series, highlighting our Black-owned businesses, a panel discussion about Black Lives Matter, Black history, and what Juneteenth means today. Live artwork by artists Sidney Gravel and Ashley Lafata occur simultaneously during the event with other discussions. A discussion about the Fitchburg Abolitionist Park coming soon, while a segment on the YDD show, the Yo Daddy Do show, and more. I hope you enjoy our virtual celebration of Black lives in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. Thank you.
My learning curve, experience. If I turn my head, you might turn me in, huh? Man, I'll borderline, I might burn again. I find me a lady friend, I might fade to black with a purple tint. I'm trying to escape the hate of my side decided then I hibernate. Take a cold shower, I'm a baby neighbor, rejuvenate, make a new mistake.
We have workshops and seminars and classes, and we collaborate with others to be able to bring wellness in different capacities to people.
Thank you so much for your love and your support of the Drivers Transportation. And listen, if you need our service, please don't hesitate to call 978-400-5261 or 978-400-5494.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Fitchburg's first virtual Juneteenth event. It's not the first Juneteenth event, but it's the first virtual event. We're getting ready to start our Juneteenth panel, and let me just get right into it and introduce our panelists. To my right, I have Alex Ramos, who is a Fitchburg State University graduate, political science major. He's a youth leader at the Christian Congregation House of Fullness Life in Fitchburg and currently at work at the UMass President Office as a budget analyst. Also raised in Fitchburg and Leominster, where he was taught to use his voice to speak out about issues of injustice even as a child, and that's why he's here today. Right below me, I have Maria Vasquez, who is an Afro-Latina motivational speaker and life coach, and she has a really wonderful book called Super Sparkly Everything. Shameless plug, y'all should go get it. We also have Linda Mason, who is the president of the Massachusetts Martin Luther King Coalition. She has been a member of the coalition for 18 years. She's also a retired English teacher. She's taught in Texas, Alaska, and retired from the Fitchburg Public School System after 20 years of service. Quick backstory about the MFA Coalition. It's been in existence for 21 years and presents an annual commemoration program to honor the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. I should know because I was there last year. It was really cool. Last year, the organization began a Wrestling with Racism series based on Dr. Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, which has recently rose to #1 on USA Today's bestseller list. David Demosthenes, he's an administrative coordinator at Suffolk University and also happens to be my brother. And finally, I believe we have Dr. Danette Day, who's an associate professor of education at Fitchburg State University, a social justice activist and a public scholar with a 29-year career in public, private, charter, innovation, and higher education. She teaches courses in cultural competence, curriculum development, educational leadership at Fitchburg State University. Her research ideas include diversity pedagogy, student sense of belonging and mindfulness in teaching and learning. Dr. Day is committed to the preparation of reflective teachers and educational administrators who are culturally, socially, and politically aware. She is also co-chair of the Fitchburg Friends of the Abolitionist Park. They partner with Fitchburg State and the Three Pyramids Incorporation, and they commemorate the men and women of Fitchburg who fought for the abolition of slavery back in the 1800s. So now that I've introduced the panelists, let's get started with the first question, which is fielded to everybody. What does Juneteenth mean to you?
I would say it's a celebration of progress in America and in history. For me, it's a celebration to a point where law meets lives, and it does it in a way where it's not just changing like procedure, it's changing culture and it's changing perspective. And it took a while to fully enact, and it took a while, and it was troubling laying all the information out, and the history was a troubling one, but it was a momentous day where people stood up and say, we're not going to live like this anymore.
Let's go with Ms. Mason. Linda.
Juneteenth, as the anniversary indicates, Juneteenth indicates, it's a hidden history of our delayed, even denied rights. I was not even made aware of Juneteenth until I was 30, living in Alaska. A local Black church there was holding an outdoor celebration, which everyone was invited to. I attended the event, not even knowing the significance of the day. It was mostly food, fun, and fellowship. Someone briefly said that it was a celebration of Black culture in the South. Not until nearly 10 years later, when I returned to Massachusetts, did I learn in detail at an annual event that was held in actually Worcester, Massachusetts. They had a festival there that included stations with an array of slavery artifacts and literature on display. Juneteenth had only recently been recognized in this area. I think recognizing and writing the disparity through correct inclusion, inclusive written history inspires us as a people, and it's essential in educating everyone. It's imperative that it be included in our educational institutions.
Thank you, Linda. Alex.
Juneteenth to me symbolizes freedom, unity, and the dedication of the people who fought hard for this freedom to pass. For me, it's a day to reflect to see if we as a nation are living up to the morals and the values that was written in the Emancipation Proclamation. And what's impacting to me is that, in this document, it was the only historical document that contained the actual wording that stated that slaves were equal, not less, but equal to their owners. So Juneteenth to me is a testament of how people, for a common cause, when they join together, they can accomplish anything. So Juneteenth to me is progress in society, and it's a symbol of freedom, unity, and hard work of our ancestors.
Thank you. Let's go with Maria.
Juneteenth to me is about resilience, and it's about celebrating ancestry and remembering, personally speaking, and in terms of this nation, that people of color and Black people specifically are the most magical, resilient humans that exist, because when we think about the ancestry and what had to happen for us to be here, for you to be here, it just feels like magic, right? And there's this overwhelming sense of resilience and ancestry. So for me, Juneteenth is really about a celebration of ancestry, of the work, of the resilience, of this determination to have equal rights, because a lot of the slaves weren't emancipated, they emancipated themselves. And then in the emancipation of themselves, the government went like, oh, we should do something about this, right? So it was this determination that I am deserving and worthy, and I'm gonna step into it. And like that resilience, that magic, that's what Juneteenth represents for me.
Nice. Dr. Day, close it out for us.
Okay, so this is what my students would do. They say, oh, I agree with everything else that everybody has said. So everything that everybody has said, I agree with. This is how they do this to me, right? But honestly, Juneteenth, for me, as the daughter of an African-American man who grew up in Texas, it was really interesting that right before the Independence Day celebration of July 4th, my father would say, oh, well, we're going to do something for Juneteenth. And we have a barbecue or something. And it'd be like, well, this is weird. Like we get 2 days to celebrate independence. And then, starting to really understand. I don't think I would have understood it as Freedom Day and a celebration of a struggle in the context of it being, Black people struggling in America, had my father not been from Texas, because as Linda had said, it wasn't taught. I mean, it wasn't a part of, I grew up in Shirley, Mass. It wasn't a part of my upbringing. And I think that's a tragedy in some ways, because there's a lot of information that's left out. And I hope that we can do some curriculum reform and support the education of all peoples to really understand what the significance of this date and as Maria said, the liberation of a resilient people and magical people is what she said.
I like that word.
Magic.
I like that word. All right, on to our second question. Juneteenth, in my opinion, was an awakening of sorts for people of color all across the U.S. And if you've seen, if you've had if you paid any attention to what's been going on in the news, a lot of things have been happening. And to me, it also seems like it's a new awakening. A lot more people are waking up to the fact that police brutality and racism and institutionalized racism is still alive and well in the United States. In what other ways, based on the events that's been going on, has this been an awakening in the U.S. to people of color and people across the United States as a whole?
So it's an interesting question, and I thought about it in regards to this idea of we have progress and then there's regress, right? There's this perpetual flow of movement forward and stagnation, and then sometimes movement backward. So I think lately what we're seeing is a collective conscious of diverse people across our globe that have become more aware that human life, specifically Black lives, and not just that, our planet, the democratic ideals that are in jeopardy of extinction. And I think that's what we're seeing is people demanding change, social, economic, political change, right? Because the status quo and privileged whiteness and the genocide of Black people is not working, right? It's not working. And so you get these outcries for equity and justice, and this momentum is being built up. And so that it's similar to what happened, prior to President Lincoln's announcement of the Emancipation Proclamation, right? People were in the midst of the Civil War. He said, okay, so Black Americans, African Americans are free. Now that moral cry to say to slave owners, hey, you got to free people, that call wasn't heeded. And it wasn't until, 2 years and 6 months after that, and in the midst of the Civil War, that, this idea, in the aftermath, the Civil War, that the news reached Texas, right, Galveston. So legally, and Alex talked about the legality of things, right? So legally, slavery had ended, and in 1965, and that was the 13th Amendment. But that legal ending did not change the social and economic implications of the 4 centuries of slavery that we have been under, right? Because there's some variation of that in today's world. So you have so much of the the inequities in social and economics, and so now people are saying, okay, so we understand the stories, we understand the history, we understand that for so long, this was allowed and laws were put into place. But even today, this Juneteenth celebration, it's the opportunity to acknowledge that 13th Amendment and all the other reconstructive amendments that came after, emancipation and the first reform, the legal amendment to the Constitution, we still have, our democracy is built on racism. We haven't admitted that. We have unemployment in disparities in the African American community and the brown and Black people in our country, law enforcement, education, housing, healthcare. There's so many disparities. And so this is like a bittersweet time, right? People are excited that people are becoming aware and this awakening is happening, but we also know that this has been a hard fought freedom and people have continuously pushed us back, which is indicative of what's happening today in Tulsa, right? You've got a lot of pushback. People want to go back to the status quo and the old ways. So there's a lot that we still need to do, but we're okay with duality because Black and brown people have been dealing with duality for a long time. Linda, did I steal your thunder?
No, everything.
Love it.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm not sure, as I just said, how much is really known about Juneteenth, particularly by people of color in this region that have grown up in this region based on my personal experience. In fact, knowledge of our history seems to have diminished. That's just my perspective at my age, my time, and looking across. Anyway, our institutions of learning even are lean toward teaching that racism is a thing of the past. Perhaps awareness that though slavery had ended in 1862, but approximately 250,000 slaves were unaware for almost 30 months, an injustice in itself, tantamount to the brutality of slavery. Extrajudicial killings becoming more common, it seems to be bearing out the reality that we're not healed as a nation and that these events reveal the roots of racism are deep within our systems and institutions, and that they can no longer be denied or minimized. In fact, they're on the rise. And I agree, as I said, Dr. Day covered it beautifully in detail. And so I'm kind of reiterating parts of what she just said, but that's all I had.
No, you're highlighting. You are highlighting. You are not reiterating. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Encouragement. Queens supporting queens. I love it. I love it. So our next question is fielded towards Maria Vasquez and David Demosthenes. People have protested and called out police brutality for years, and yet now it seems like more and more people are listening. We see corporations and businesses like NASCAR, Nike, Ben & Jerry's making bold statements against police brutality and against institutionalized racism. So what do you think has changed over the years? Why now?
I'm feeling that, in my opinion, I feel like various communities, particularly marginalized communities, they're beginning to realize just how fragile their status really is. And these corporations are starting to see that and recognize that, where you have most of the consumer bases, they're realizing that they're not, the perspective and the worldview that they had isn't as certain anymore. And if you think just between the last decade, between like 9/11, economic crisis, financial crisis, housing crisis, recessions, political, tribal warfare, and several ideas and realities of devastating environmental tragedies. And on top of that, with the surge of journalism and social media, people are starting to realize that who they are and what they've built their entire lives on is a lot more fragile than they really realize. And it's kind of creating almost like a spirit of wokeness with a lot of people, where they're starting to look up and raise their heads and say, I can do better than this. And I think that sense is beginning to permeate not just amongst small communities, but it's becoming a people's movement. And or at least it's my hope it's going to become a people's movement. And now you have larger corporations beginning to listen to that and actually follow through and make these claims saying, we're listening to our communities because this is something we can't ignore anymore. And I think especially in this point too, where the idea of Black lives and knowing Black history, it's not just something that's being discussed, it's something that's being embraced. We're not just a case study anymore. We're not an elective of history. We are part of the main story, and we are not being ignored anymore. So in my opinion, I think that's that slow spirit of wokeness is coming in. And as long as we don't put our heads back down, hopefully the movement will keep going.
Not just a case study. I like that.
Yeah. I'm
Maria,
taking
what would you like
notes. I'm like,
what would you
that's
like to
good.
add?
That's good. I gotta write that down. Thank you, David. Yes, a lot of what I was gonna say is similar to what David mentioned. And I also just want to point out that I'm recognizing personally, again, I can only tell my story and the story of the people that I'm closest to, is that we are more and more starting to come into full knowledge of who we are and our own deservedness. And so this is a new time where people are becoming less and less complacent. And then we are holding accountable our own people and white people and saying, it's time. Like, you love me, you call yourself my friend, it's time you got to step up, speak out, you got to vote accordingly. Where you putting your money? Where you putting your money, right? That's how I'm calling out all the people who claim to love me and are of a whiter shade, right? You love my sister, you love my brothers, you love my people, then where's your voice? Where's your vote? Where's your money going, right? And we're in this new space of what I believe that we are holding each other and ourselves accountable. We are calling it out. Like you said at the beginning, Theo, the most popular books right now that are being sold out are books on racism and white fragility. And so what's coupling with that is this desire for education, because what people of color, indigenous people and Black people are also saying is, I'm tired of telling you, right? And then they see it on a screen, and then we go, I'm tired of saying it over and over and over again. You go ahead and educate yourself. And so there's this upstream of education. And then I have white friends reaching out going, I had no idea. And I'm like, but I told you, but we talked about it. But what happens is, and this is the reality, right? What happens is, unfortunately, you need to see the Amy Coopers of the world on a video weaponize her whiteness. You need to see a man put his hands in his pocket while he kneels on another man's neck. You need to see a man sleeping in his car, having a normal conversation with a police officer, and then it escalates to the point where he gets shot, and you need to see it. You done? Like, can we start doing some work now? So it's the coupling of the movement of social media, the movement of journalism, the movement of people not being afraid to go just like this. You're on camera, right? Before there was a fear in that. Now it's like, no, I am deserving and worthy. There's an app now where you can say, hey, Siri, I got pulled over. And Siri will automatically turn on a camera facing you and start recording it. You designate a person and it live streams it to that person instantly. That app should never have to exist, but because of technology, because of social media, because of education, because of all those things that are happening now, the movement is in a place where you cannot look away. And if you do, please understand that we are calling you out and letting you know you are part of the problem, right? So all of those things coupled together is what's creating this amazing movement. And I love how David said it's a movement of the people, because again, it's not just about Black people, it's about indigenous people and Hispanic and white people. Like, y'all kind of built the structure, and it's time for y'all to step up and help take it down, right? So it's all of those things together, yeah, that I think are bringing it to the awareness.
Love it. You just reminded me of a quote that Will Smith said, racism isn't growing, and it's being filmed, which means it's getting more and more exposed. And I think, like you said, because of social media, more and more people are becoming aware of it. Excellent points, both of you. Next question. We know that Juneteenth is a celebration of the day that the slaves in Texas found out that they were free on June 19th, 1865. However, like we all said before, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, 2 years earlier. So the slaves were free without realizing that they were free. Do you see any parallels to that concept, that incident, in today's times? Do you see any parallels where you see people were free without realizing they were free, or people had power where they didn't realize they had power? Do you see any similarities like that in today's times, especially these past couple of years?
Yeah, so I'll go first. So the parallels that we see today is that, many in society, we are taught that slavery is over, racism is a thing of the past. People of color, they have all the freedom they need, and therefore there are no reparations that need to occur. But is that really true? I mean, we are told that we're free, and we are told that people of color, they have the same life opportunities like everyone else in society. But we are never told of the obstacles that we have to face even before that we're born. Because even though that there is no racism on its face, there's still racism systemically. There are still stereotypes alive today. Economic and social mobility is more difficult to achieve for people of color. And we are more likely to be victims of police brutality. And even our resume might be considered by an employer or might not be considered by an employer because of how the first or last name might sound. So yes, we are free. Yes, we have the same rights. We are told that we are free, but we need to realize that there's still work to be done. Well, we have to manifest the absolute freedom and equality that our ancestors fought for. So that's why I firmly believe that we need more people of color to run for office. We need to have more people of color achieve higher education. We need more people of color in power. Because yes, we are free, but if we unite together, we can make changes in our community, make our politicians write new laws, raise awareness on these issues, and overcome the obstacles that were given to us even before they were born. Because at the end of the day, we're all Americans. So we need to understand that we can overcome these obstacles that we have to face, by coming together and know that we are free and that we need to manifest the rights that we have as Americans.
Wow, he hit a lot of points, and I was with every one of them. I loved it.
Thank you.
Ms. Mason, please add.
Absolutely perfect. Beautifully said, Alex. Agree with everything in its entirety. Really, I do. I think everything that he was talking about, institutional racism that we still face. When the slaves were freed, they faced the issues of employment, housing, education, the things basic to be self-sufficient. And so they were still enslaved. And then on top of that, they literally, actually for 2.5 years, weren't even aware of this so-called freedom. And today, the same. Our institutions are not really directed at helping us. I mean, we're still facing the same issues in education, employment, healthcare, housing, criminal justice, which is, a real, issue of late. But the same things, same things.
Thank you both. Next question. The Reconstruction era, which lasted from 1865 to 1876, was an effort to bring back the Southern states into the Union and to integrate former slaves into society. In your opinion, what worked, what didn't, and why?
Full disclosure, I'm not a historian. I'm an educator, so I'm a generalist when it comes to knowledge. I know a little bit of a lot of things. So what I do know about this period in our history is that the continuation of the fight for rights, whether it was legally, we had the 14th Amendment ratified, we had a Civil Rights Act passed, so Black men could vote, they could gain full citizenship. We had the government setting up the Freedmen's Bureau, which was an agency to support the millions of Africans or Black Americans who were displaced because of the end of slavery. And then we had a lot of pushback because once we never really acknowledged that what had occurred in this country a few hundred years prior. We can't even decide when slavery was enacted in our country, right? Some people say 1619 was the first time Jamestown where Africans were brought to the shores of America and were enslaved. Some people say that there were 500,000 people that came before that. And no matter what we say about the time, we know that there's never been a formal apology. So we still have people who believe that Blacks, people of color, even the natives to this country are not, don't have the same rights, aren't fully people and shouldn't be recognized. And so there's no apology, there's no restoration. When I was in schools, if someone had done something wrong, we did restorative justice, right? And we asked people who would cause the harm to others to make reparations by saying, first of all, you apologize, but then you make the community better. And so I think what happened in Reconstruction, you know, government tried to attempt to make the environment better in some ways, but they never apologized. They never recognized the wrongs, right? They never took responsibility. And so it didn't change the mindset that Blacks, natives who were dispossessed of their lands were in some way still seen as less than and not equal to. So a lot of these rules, regulations, laws, Freedmen's Bureau, all of these, all the monies that were put out to support, to some extent, the lives of people to, you know, begin a new life, there was never a formal apology. And some of what was being offered was rescinded. And then there was pushback from a lot of people in the South who just still believed that, you know, if the war had gone a different way, they would have had a different United States, and they're still fighting for that ideal of what the United States should be in their mind. And if you look at Tulsa, that's what they're fighting for still, right? So I think we made some strides, just to say that we made some strides, but I also think there was a lot of pushback. And this is what's interesting. I'm just going to read something quickly, maybe not so quickly, but it's a saying. It was a part of a speech that Frederick Douglass gave in 1857. He delivered it as a part of the West India Emancipation. And then this was like the 33rd anniversary in 1857 when he was speaking about it again. So this is about the struggle to continue to reform and to make things better for more people. And that's really been what Black Americans have done. It isn't just ever about ourselves or just Blacks, right? It's about, in general, we're looking to find allies to decrease human suffering, right? By sharing resources, creating opportunity, changing legislation, reimagining how to sustain all human life, right? And also to protect our planet, because like this is the only planet we have. So, you know, we've been working toward this for a long time. So Frederick Douglass said, let me give you a word of the philosophy of reform. The whole history of the progress of human liberty shows that all concessions yet made by her august claims have been born of earnest struggle. The conflict has been exciting, agitating, all-absorbing, and for the time being, putting all other tumults to silence. Now, this was 1857 he's talking about, right before the Civil War. So I don't know if this man had some, you know, he was getting some sense of what was about to come, but he goes on to say, it must do this. And he's talking about reform. It must do this or it does nothing. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its mighty waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, and it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without demand. It never will, it never did, it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them, and these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. So he really knew what struggle was about. And so this has continued. So Reconstruction afforded us, just to get back to your question, Theo, I'm sorry. Reconstruction afforded us some progress forward, but it also brought this, it reared its ugly head. Black codes came into being. You know, people were not going to concede their power. And you saw increased in, you know, property being destroyed. Sure, we had some people that were in positions of power, but still, you know, it's going to continue to be a struggle. And we made some gains and then we were pushed back. So now I'm going to toss it over to Maria.
That was like, yes, like, whoa. because yes. And thank you for reading that by Frederick Douglass. Because okay, so I'm also going to make the same disclaimer. I'm not a historian. What I do know that came from the Reconstructive era was the first Black senator, right? And his first term only lasted a year because of death threats and all the other stuff that was happening. And then there was a second Black senator, but he was mixed. His father had been the owner of his enslaved mother. And then the next Black senator didn't happen until 1967. Right? Like, so, okay, on the one end, the Reconstruction gave Black men seats in political office, but on the other hand, it was torn down so quickly because, like Dr. Day said, there was so much fear in letting go of or even pretending to share the space that they, as soon as they, right, that's real, as soon as they recognized like, oh my gosh, he has power, he's educated, they had to pull it back immediately. So it took, the second Black senator, it was like 1881 when his term ended. And then it was 1967, 80 something years later, that we had our next Black senator. The Freedmen's Bureau, like she spoke of, the best part for me that came out of that was the Black schools and the Black colleges. Like Howard University was born from the Freedmen's Bureau, and Clark University and Fisk University were all born of the Freedmen's Bureau. So it was finally like, oh, I guess we can educate them. But then again, what happened was they put the money in and then pulled the funding, right? And they would start to kind of move forward. And then as soon as people threw a tantrum, they pull it back real quick. And it felt more like, in my research and in my reading, like America, where they say, we're going to placate them. We're going to give them this thing to placate them. See, we signed the paper, it's fine. And then the second you look away, we're going to pull that funding, and we're going to pull that money, and we're going to pull those rights, and we're going to pull all that. So that we got the 13th Amendment where people were free, but we know that they weren't free because then they created all these dumb laws to criminalize Black people. And then the second you became a criminal, you were no longer considered free. And then we say, okay, you're citizens, but not really. And okay, you have the right to vote, but not if you committed a crime and you jaywalked. So like dumb stuff was starting to happen as a result of this attempt to reintegrate the states, the southern and the northern states, and to bring Black people into the full, like, into humanity, right? Into just having access to living and having their basic needs met. And the other thing that I love about what Dr. Day said is there was no apology. And because all things rise and fall with leadership, whether in a classroom, whether in a school, whether in a business, whether in a government, all things rise and fall with leadership. And if the leadership is not saying this was wrong, we all need to get it together, then everybody else is like, la, la, la. Like, why do they have to listen when the leadership is saying, you know what, just do this? And let's be clear, right? We all know now, we didn't know then because our education was whitewashed, that Abraham Lincoln didn't necessarily create the Emancipation Proclamation to free the slaves. He did it to get people to quiet down, right? It was more like, how can I bring the Union back together as quickly as possible? I'll sign this paper. But it's a piece of paper, and contracts they're not made of stone. And so they're easily able to find and write in, let's be clear, they're writing in all these loopholes on purpose. So on the one hand, she very beautifully said, we have progress, we have stagnation, and then we have regress. And it almost felt like, oh, there's this little bit of progress. And then, Andrew Johnson was like, psych, and just ripped it all away from everybody, because it became scary that these humans who have a higher level of melanin could possibly be as intelligent, if not more so, than me. These beautiful beings could possibly be more culturally in tune than me. And so it was like this intimidation said, oh my gosh, this is scary. Pull it back, pull it back, pull it back. Let's create, sharecropping, which is basically slavery, right? Like they're barely getting enough to feed their families, and they're not able to develop enough profit, enough increase in their income to gain any kind of financial progress. And so it was like they created these fun little ways little ways to play with people and say, see, but we gave you what you want. We did that for you. This is what Reconstruction era makes me think of. before the whole COVID thing happened, I was at a family event and there were these two small children playing, and the little girl was playing with a truck, and she was there minding her business playing with the truck, and she was happy, and the little boy came over and took the truck from her. And then she started crying, and his mother said, well, she has to learn how to share, but it was hers to begin with, and you stole it. And then the very act of asking for it back, you feel so defensive that you don't want to say to your son, you're wrong, apologize, give her the truck back. It felt like that, right? Rather than say, listen, you had no right to go into these people's countries and lives and rip them. You had no right to come to a land where people lived and say, I declare that I just discovered it. You didn't discover, there are people here. You didn't discover it. It's not like, what? And there, nobody said, P.S., we kind of missed it, we messed up. There was none of that. And so that interaction between those little kids and that mom feeling so defensive, like my son should not have to apologize. Like, no. And then the whole family basically was like, nah, make him apologize right now, or you can take your son and wrap it up, right? So she made him apologize. Listen, this is how we do. Like, we don't play. But it was like that, right? And so we need that in this country. You're absolutely right, Dr. Day, when you say it, because that's what it makes me think of. We need people to apologize. We need, yes.
Y'all should start a history channel together, because I love the analogies. Oh, something both of you said that made me think of this. It was a quote, I don't remember from who, but you can't legislate morality. And I think it was Linda who brought it up. Just because we put stuff into laws doesn't mean you change the hearts of these people. And so that definitely, you know, with the truck analogy and with everything else, it ties into why Reconstruction ended up failing, because people, their hearts have not changed, and they were hell-bent on making sure they had their status quo and they had their way.
I want to add this one thing. My friend Grace Aldridge, she is just this amazing human, right? And she really is. And she does a lot of this race relations work. And yesterday she posted a video, and she was kind of declaring to white people, you cannot continue to outsource your humanity. You cannot continue to outsource vulnerability or the struggle. You have to take it on and get real uncomfortable and feel it so that you can want to make change, right? And I just love the idea of that's what has been happening for all these years. Outsourcing the labor, outsourcing the work, outsourcing the literal tilling of the grounds, right? Outsourcing it and then wanting to reap the benefits of it. And we're saying no more.
All right, let's move on. That was a lot. A lot. I love it. The Reconstruction era and the Civil Rights Movement and even the Black Lives Matter movement have faced serious backlash from people who want to keep the status quo. Based on what you've seen in the past couple of years, what kind of backlash have we, as people who've been promoting Black Lives Matter, people who've been fighting for police reform, what kind of backlash have you seen?
Well, for me, I think the easy can't miss layup answer to this question is the All Lives Matter movement. It's something that's erupted as a response to it, and I know it's
Oh, I'm not muted. I'm sorry. I was muted.
You're not muted now, bro. It's funny. We're in the same house. He's like right in the next room. But it's something that's erupted as a response to it, and I see it as for me personally, I see it as a backlash where you have people who either try to marginalize or minimize the type of the gravity of the situation, where I think that's going to be one of the biggest things that you see and feel with what's going on. Hold on, he's coming over. Yep, he's in the room. He's in the picture now. Another thing I've been seeing is actually, this has been like on my mind a lot, is almost like ally backlash, where we have people who call themselves allies with people who say they're with us, but they're not completely with us. I know it was mentioned before in the previous question, where there were people, a lot of allies, they would subscribe to doing marginal compromises. They'll be like, well, again, I'll give you this, but you have to do it in a way that works for me. You'll have a voice, but you can only use a voice here, and here. Or you can vote, but you can only do it in these neighborhoods. So it's like these marginal compromises that even people that say they stand with us, they're not fully with us in that sense. Oftentimes I find a lot of times allyship can be very performative, and that gut reaction, that when allies or people that say the same with us, when it's their turn to pass the mic, they don't want to do it. I've seen it, even people, like a lot of movements, even people planning protests, a lot of allies will come up with for good intentions. They'll say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But when the Black community finally gets involved, they're like, well, I don't like the way it's being done. But it was never your movement. It was never your voice. You're supposed to elevate and echo us. So that's almost like that sense of ally backlash I've been seeing where people who say they stand with us don't feel comfortable in a way. And I think that's something, that sense of uncomfortability is something that a lot of people need to get used to. And of course, there's just straight up violence. That's another part of backlash. We're seeing a lot more, I don't know if this is because there's an increase in it or just an increase in recording of this as well, but we're seeing and reviewing a lot more just police brutality. We're seeing a lot more violence. We're seeing a lot more microaggressions. And that can come from a sense, I think it was mentioned best too when Professor Day was saying it, once they figure out what that exact appeasement looks like, they try to give it to us, but power doesn't concede without demand. And once we're we're starting to ask people for what is owed us, for a sense of equality, they're fighting back, and that can come out in forms of pure violence. So that's some of the backlash that I'm seeing between just All Lives Matter, actual physical violence, people trying to marginalize the trauma that is our history, as well as just allies saying that they stand with us, but because they don't know who we are, what we are, they're not able to try to represent us right. And sometimes it's not your job to represent us. You're supposed to stand with us. You echo our voices. That means now it's your time to pass the mic. And sometimes they don't know what to do with their hands if the mic's not in their hands. So allowing people just to kind of take a step back and actually hear and listen to the voices. So that's the type of backlash I'm seeing.
Wow. You're just coming up with quotes left and right. I don't know what to do on my hands when I don't have the mic. Like, sheesh. Ugh. Anyways, Alex, feel free to add on. Let's go.
Yes, David, I completely agree, and I want to add on. So some forms of backlash that I've seen as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement is the negative reaction that we've seen from the protests. We see the media where they're focusing more on the negative aspect more than the positive. Where in the media they're showing, they're focusing on destruction or the looting during the marches, but they don't focus on the peaceful protesters that are marching in unity for a common cause. And many people, like David mentioned, are saying that all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter. That is backlash, because of course, all lives matter, but until we recognize that, people of color and African Americans have been victims of police brutality, racial profiling, stereotypes, then we can say that all lives matter. I also wanted to say that, to all the people who are activating right there, the people who are involved and the people who are in the protest, the people who are activists right now in this movement, I just want to talk to you for a moment to say to not focus on that backlash, because be like the leaders in the civil rights movement, like Martin Luther King Jr., where he said he did not tolerate injustice. He overcame that backlash, and in the midst of that, he said, I have a dream. So I know that dream is still attainable if we work together. We can overcome this backlash by joining together for a common cause, and to say that, yes, Black Lives Matter, and yes, that we can unite for this common cause to bring changes in our community, and to say that Black lives not only matter, but that Black lives are blessed, they're valued, and we need them in our community. We cannot take that away from this movement.
Thank you to Alex Ramos, Dr. Danette Day, David Demosthenes, Linda Mason, and Maria Vasquez. I'm your moderator, Theodore Demosthenes. Thank you very much. And guys, enjoy the rest of the Juneteenth virtual event.
Bye. Thank you all.
I appreciate you.
You know what I'm saying? Welcome to the YDD show. My name is your daddy. Those are the Showtime. We got Christian. We got Uncle C-Hack. We got Barney. We got Merrick. You know what I'm saying? I hope y'all enjoy. I hope y'all came here for WAPA content, because that's what. Whoo! They treat us like animals. They would say that 400 years of slavery. We're talking about Juneteenth. All right, January 31st, the date the 13th Amendment passed Congress in 1865, officially abolishing the institution of slavery.
The first true Independence Day was actually July 4th, 1865. 1776 is the original one. 1865 is the one where all Americans were finally able.
Oh, so in all actuality, we all should be celebrating Juneteenth because it's actually the day that everybody in America was free.
This is for all of us.
Oh, so this is for all. So we should be doing this together.
If we were looked at as equals. Get a minuscule understanding of what's going on. Yeah, you understand? They just let you know that slavery was a bad thing and it happened, and then that's how they shut it up.
No, but then some districts will teach slavery as like indentured servitude, and that's wrong.
Bro, but back in the day, screw that. That's obvious. But back in the day, when you were in kindergarten and you did the Pilgrims and Indians thing, how wrong is that? Now you think about it.
Now that you know
when you were in your class and you were like, oh, I want to be Indians and you want to be Pilgrims. If you look at it now and you would have just recollected, or if you would have knew the knowledge you knew now that they were looking at Indians as savages, and then you're just sitting there depicting this in your little play, your school play that your teacher let you do. Like, you know what I mean? So you're the Pilgrims and I'm the Indians. I'm black. I was always an Indian.
Yep.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, not for nothing. I was never a Pilgrim. Plus, their swag was corny. Ain't nobody want to wear that shit.
Buckles on your shirt.
I'm wildin'. Yeah, I'm wildin'. I don't care.
They put the buckle on the hat.
Yeah, they put the buckle on the hat because it was on the hat.
I mean,
they look like the Dutch masters.
I wanted to shout out the historian, especially
hip-hop and history.
Especially of Fitchburg facts, Big Fisher K. Here's some interesting history about Snow Street in Fitchburg. Got his name. Benjamin Snow Jr. was an abolitionist who welcomed runaway slaves into his home on what is now Snow Street with open arms.
Shout out to Snow Street.
Right. Shout out to Benjamin Snow Jr.
So if you look in that bottom right corner, that was
that's my guy.
The bottom right corner, there's a picture of a bell. This bell was purchased by Benjamin Snow Jr. Off a plantation that some of the slaves that came from in Mississippi, and he purchased this bell and said like it would not be rung until all the slaves were free, and you know what I'm saying, it is Juneteenth, so sometime in 1865 he rang this bell in downtown Fitchburg.
That's fire.
Shout out Fisher K for giving us some Fitchburg, like, you know what I'm saying, like our important role. I also want to shout out the Abolitionist Park. It's right here in Fitchburg, so if you can, I know they have a Facebook page, Friends of Fitchburg Abolitionist Park. Learn some information is very important, especially like because like we're just now learning about nationally and like big events. You know what I'm saying? Like it's also important to like know that somewhere that you call close to home. You know what I'm saying? Like Christian mentioned, you know what I'm saying, from New York, so he has a certain type of history, and you know what I'm saying.
Oh, we should talk about that too.
Yo, so you know we about to give it up? You know how we about to give it up?
How we about to give it up?
You ever heard of something called eminent domain?
Eminent domain.
Oh yeah, that means everything is mine.
Yeah, that means the government can come through and be like, hey, I know y'all was getting funky over here. I see y'all getting jiggy with it, but
at the Zen
we gonna need this block right here. So here's a little bit of money,
and you gotta get out.
And you gotta be out. So this is a yet another opportunity for Black people to have built generational wealth that was maybe stripped away by bureaucracy. But Christian, being from New York, you know about Seneca Village. It's in an area of Upper Manhattan that is now Central Park. So there was a family that lived there. They owned some land in what is now Central Park, and they subdivided it into 200 plots and would sell the land to anyone. Any free man could buy it. So what happened? Freed slaves came, and they were like, hey, we chipped our money together, just like you've been saying, Christian. We got to put our money together. We got to buy this land. So they bought that land
for $578, which, I mean, at the time was a lot of money, obviously.
Right, but yeah. So there was a thriving Black community there in New York, and eminent domain.
Yep.
What happens? They come through and they're like, hey, we want to build this recreation area, so all you folks got to leave. Can you imagine the generational wealth that would have been left if Black people had owned that land in Upper Manhattan right now, today?
Typical American Black story.
It's honestly, it's crazy. It's disheartening. I mean, while Seneca Village wasn't necessarily an affluent community, it was a thriving African American community.
Now, and I'll tell you this right now: go buy you the block. Go buy you some land. There was actually a story about some young creatives in in Louisiana who just like recently, like this is like a couple weeks ago, bought like a whole block.
Like a county. It was like a town, like a small.
Yeah,
town.
like a small, like you know what I'm saying. Like they bought that whole, bought the whole thing.
And if the government decides to give us some extra money, give us some reparations, and we got our shit together, we might be able to actually flip the script.
Whatever y'all got, we putting our money together, we get it. I don't care where it is. It don't even matter, bro.
It doesn't.
If that's
It
possible,
really doesn't.
it don't even matter. The possibilities is endless.
So yeah, everybody's heard of the
Good
Panthers.
conversation,
But Monroe, North Carolina, have you heard of the Black Armed Guard? And I'm glad to know that
Robert F. Williams. Shout out to my man.
There are other like-minded individuals who do know about the Black Armed Guard. The Black Armed Guard was basically established to do battle with the KKK, essentially just to protect the black citizens of Monroe, North Carolina, from the KKK, the armed and dangerous and menacing.
But the population,
KKK.
you have to also, I don't know if you knew the census of like the population of that place, in like the 12 out of the 12,000 people who were populated in that area, it was like 7,500 of them were Ku Klux Klan members. So like
outrageous,
like a third, more or less, roughly, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, of your community were openly racist. So
Yeah.
you had to sit there in that community and know that you were living amongst, you were just a small percentage of being a part of a racist, whole racist community, and would have had to swallow that shit.
So obviously at this time everything is segregated still. So there's one black doctor in town. Protect him at all costs, right? So what did the Black Armed Guard do? They set up sandbags around his house,
50
ready
to 60
for the Klan's drive-by that they had been planning.
Ex-militant
That's what I'm
armed
saying.
guards from African American descent.
Yep. A little did the Klan know who was hiding behind the sandbags.
Getting it cracking, shooting out in
Get it
broad
cracking,
day.
bust back. You know,
Bust it
when you-
back.
When they see you're not afraid to bust back, then
It's you
It
scared.
was Dr. A.E. Perry, Vice President
yes.
of the local NAACP.
Well,
But I mean, like,
Get with
so
your
think about
knowledge.
that.
Get with your knowledge. If as a community, we gotta get with our knowledge, man. I'm telling you, you're gonna be
Absolutely.
excited.
But
This is crazy.
But that goes to show you, like, maybe that's not exactly the way it happens. Maybe you don't need to have a gunfight, but sometimes you do need to have a gunfight
Bro.
because that caused political change.
What
From
they
that
did,
moment on, the KKK needed permits to organize.
exactly, and they made a rule that was just discriminated against there. But you were also scared of having an NRA and a black man being able to legally get his
Literally.
gun and then be able to know his rights. And then the worst thing you have is an educated, militant black man.
Before we go here on the 2020 Fitchburg Juneteenth celebration, the YDD show, the Zindan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For my people who are in my local area, shout out New View Communities, North Central Mass Charter. I want to give you some information. You saw the video from Irene from the Minority Coalition. Try to figure out a way that you can be involved in more community type things. The majority of people who have been here have been doing this on a capacity. We have to continue to do it. We have to keep the pressure, keep the foot on their neck, and keep like being able to build and share information the way that we have been. Local organizations that you can get in touch with today. There is the Massachusetts MLK Coalition. You can also join and find out information about the Minority Coalition and Three Pyramids Incorporated. You can also check out your local office, boards, and commissions. Find out like because I know school committees, they need people of color. They need people who are of diversity, as much diversity that exists in our community.
Representation.
You can just go on the City of Fitchburg's website.
Start pushing some real history.
That's it. And of course, obviously, register to vote. Please register to vote.
Register to vote.
November is right around the corner, and you're gonna be
get that
inside
man
the
out of
whole
there.
entire time. Maybe not the whole entire time, because y'all out here wilding. I see y'all.
QB1 for president.
see
bro.
you,
I'm about to run independent.
We appreciate y'all coming out. Uncle C Hack, Christian, thank you for being here. Yo, Daddy, though,
Appreciate
it's
y'all for
always a
having
great
me.
time. I can't wait to see y'all on
Shout out
Monday.
to Zindan, shout out to all the people, you know what I'm saying, who's out here watching.